So now you know who I was rooting for in that Notre Dame Washington game. It's a great pleasure to be here. Is it rain often in Seattle? Is that? But it doesn't snow as much as it is in Minnesota. Actually, it's great to be from Minnesota. Our weather is actually nicer than yours, except in November, December, January, February, and probably March. But other than that, it's spectacular. A pleasure to be here with Christina, who I've gotten to know in Washington, and I express my gratitude for this invitation. And she, don't want to make her blush, but she really is a very gifted young woman. Passionate advocate, by the way, for nuclear power, environmental protection. Very passionate. Those areas, by the way, that provide, I think, a lot of opportunity, economic opportunity today. So it's passion for the right cause tied in with opportunity. Often so things click. She comes from a family of great patriots, 3 brothers in the Marine. I understand she grows grapes, helped clean up Chernobyl, but I take greatest pride in the fact that she's an outstanding water skier. Now that's important, of course, because water skiing was invented in Lake Pepin in Minnesota, so I take kind of personal pride. And this vision of the Washington Energy and Defense Alliance, it really is an opportunity, and I want to talk a little bit about the opportunity. It's kind of going to be like a rah-rah speech. These are the most challenging economic times that any of us in this room have seen in our lifetime. Most challenging. But there's also opportunity. And I'll touch on this, but the energy, security, which, by the way, often go hand in hand, great opportunity if you can seize it. If you kind of employ the great entrepreneurial spirit, you're involved, everybody here, in an area where opportunity comes together. I'm a believer in possibilitarians. That's what Christina's about, what her team at Monumental is all about. And it's really what you need. In the most challenging times, you really need that. This is when you got to dig deep for that optimistic spirit and say, how do we move forward? That is the challenge, and my remarks will touch upon that. A couple of things, obvious things. First, it takes time. This is an organization, your 3rd or 4th meeting or something. It takes time to grow. We all know that. We watch our kids, and it takes time to grow. And there are growing pains, and there are learning curves, and you're going to have to kind of understand that. Minnesota, we had experience years ago when the Minnesota Defense Alliance was started. And Minnesota is not seen as a state, with a very powerful defense industry. It's just, you don't think of defense industry in Minnesota. But what we saw is through the leadership, by the way, of small business folks. Now we've got some of the big folks in Minnesota, but it was literally small. Minnesota Wire and Cable, like Paul Wagner, took the lead. And so what you saw is small business people come together, and as a result, substantially tapped in to some of the opportunities to grow jobs through partnering with the government, federal government. And as a result, provided opportunity and jobs and prosperity because of the efforts of the alliance that came together. So we've seen in Minnesota what can happen when you come together. And again, small business folks. It wasn't the Lockheeds and others. It was the small business folks that took the lead and came with others. And I can tell you we've seen substantial growth. Real dollars, real jobs, real opportunity. And I think Washington is well situated. Again, the commonality, the university community, high-tech community, really an important part of who we are in Minnesota. And Washington goes beyond us, I think, in many of those areas. So, I'm a great believer. Always kind of, go back to who you are. It's not about creating something new. When I was mayor of St. Paul, before I got to be mayor, the city wasn't doing well, and there was one of the projects on the board was to build a $100 million new bridge. We had to get rid of the old bridge. We were on the Navajo headwaters at the beginning of the greatest river system in the world, the Mississippi. And so the idea was somehow St. Paul was going to take itself lift itself up from its bootstraps, but out of this economic depression, by creating this new image of the city, through this bridge and like the arches in St. Louis or whatever. And I was mayor. I got elected mayor and said, we're not going to do that. We got Mississippi River. It's got the heart and soul of America. The Mississippi River, by the way, if you go up to northern Minnesota, a couple hundred miles north of St. Paul, you can actually walk across the water. Literally just step over. It's a little creek. Walk across it. Travel down to St. Paul and probably hit a 3-iron across it. You travel further down, Gulf of Mexico, and it's miles wide. Out of small things, great things can happen if you have the right vision, if you have the right commitment. And I think that's really what we're talking about here, and that's the opportunity. Part of it, by the way, comes from a good congressional delegation. I'm going to call out my colleague Senator Murray, and I want to say, well, you didn't talk about anybody else, but I do want to talk about Senator Murray, by the way, who happens to be on the Appropriations Committee. It's a very good thing if you're concerned about government contracts. More than that, we co-authored the port security bill that was mentioned in my introduction. Work, cross party lines on an issue that is central to the security of this nation, and obviously for this community, and by the way, for Minnesota. Duluth is a port city. Minneapolis-St. Paul is the closest connecting route to China. Go over the globe. That's the closest route. The Northwest Orient Airlines originally. And so these issues were important to us and worked hand in hand. And having that delegation, having folks who are willing to work with you, is going to be critical. Let me offer, if I can, a little advice and guidance. Before I do, I just want to kind of lay out on the table kind of my vision of the private sector. So we're going to talk about public-private partnership. I say with great humility, when I was mayor of St. Paul, I received the National Conference of Mayors Award for public-private partnership my last year in office, above Chicago and Boston, other big cities. St. Paul's 280,000 people. In part, I, as a person from the government side, had a deep and profound respect for business. I think that's important. I think Winston Churchill summed up my vision of the private sector. He says, some people see private enterprise as a predator to be shot. Others see it as a cow to be milked. He says, few see it for what it really is, a steady workhorse pulling the wagon of human progress. So you need the private side. There's no question. But you also need government, and for a whole range of reasons. And there's at times people are frustrated over taxes and talk about this anti-government movement. You need government. I mean, some of it's pretty basic, by the way. Who does security? Government's going to do security. And by the way, today, energy independence is a national security issue. So the two go hand in hand. If you talk about where there's going to be investment, and where there's going to be a need for innovation, and where there's going to be areas of opportunity, it's in energy and defense. That's the reality. And the two are inextricably tied. The security of this nation is tied to our energy policy, tied to lessening dependence on foreign oil, tied to tapping into new innovation.